So business risks, and you can see here all 16 of the major factors are here on the left, and the business risks of those being sort of overplayed may need some guidance. So as a performance advisor, you want to make sure that you keep these in check when those are more intense scores. Take charge, can be unrealistic on goals. Maybe not consulting with others because they're so self-reliant. May reject others' opinion because they're sort of, I'm take charge. Cooperative, we've got a couple of people in the group, holding back true opinions. That can be one of the challenges. It can lead to passive aggressiveness if it's not managed correctly, if there's not a conduit to be able to, for this person to be able to be expressive. And I understand that because I've got that group oriented myself. Outgoing, maybe provide more information than, we talked about that. Michelle was very, open about that with, the person that she works with. She'll give some information and she's like, I just need the Cliff Notes version, not the full version. So it cuts you off. That can feel like sharp. Yeah, you sort of do. So I always say, do you want the Cliff Notes version? Or you want the full version? Got the option. It works with Hugh. Reserved, again, that's where you have a lot of possible listening opportunities, but they may be more withdrawn. Not sharing information because you don't see it's imperative to the conversation. Patient can procrastinate decision making and maybe compromising too much when you have that higher patient score. Fast paced, and we have a number of that, can overreact to problems, make changes too fast, too short-term oriented for results. Planned, tendency to overplan, that can be one of the issues because we know in life that things come in the way. A CEO makes a different decision. You've been in this planning phase. We've all been there. You sort of have to abandon the work that you're doing and restart something. Spontaneity, really around not being prepared, sort of in the moment. Overlook details, may not be sufficiently prepared. Some tough behavior there. We've got a lot of spontaneity in this group. Trusting, not setting those boundaries, failing to inspect when you may need to because the person that's really sort of that controlling is going to check, get you in trouble. Skeptical, can be conceived to be resisting new ideas, can be intimidating. It can come across that way. Pioneering, we've talked a lot about that today. Very driven, may not sort of understand or underestimate what needs to get done to deliver on it. Content, that status quo, because maybe in the organization we need to change the system because the competitive landscape is so, it's at our door and we're just resistant to change because we don't know. The CEO said A to Z, but we need to know what B to Y is. So we get into this content. It's really quite interesting. You got to be able, in change management, you've got to be able to move these folks along. They need to be attended to. Risk-taking, that's really around not seeing the dangers. You're just out there. You're going to take the risk. You may cut corners just to get to the goal. Cautious, could miss opportunities because we're so fearful of making a mistake or the fear of the unknown. Creative, may not seek other ways, not always practical, may not be able to be monetized. Can fail to execute consistently. It's changing all the time. And then anchored to proven on those methods that we know. And we're not being flexible enough. So those are the risks. Again, it's the intensity. It can be overplayed. Any questions on that?
I kind of have a question here. With content, I just want to make sure that I understand the definitions too, because you said something there that triggered a thought with me. The content, meaning that you're just happy with the way the company's going and all of a sudden changes come up and you need to be able to move with the change and push change along, right? So I would think that would fall on the flexible, would fall on the side of pioneering because that would, flexible would be more change than content.
Yeah, well, flexible really is, or you can be, you're not so fixed on that outcome. You can be a little bit.
Because
Okay.
I feel very much flexible, and I feel very pioneer. That's like sort of a theme
Mm-hmm.
of having started my own business and done all kinds of things. And yet it's the strong presence on the content side,
Yep.
which to me, I don't like status quo change. I
No.
love change. Love change.
Right, but
I
you do
thrive in
have,
change,
but
so-
you have that initiator. So you have those scorings. You have initiator. You're higher on initiating.
Right, but
So-
why? So I'm just questioning the flexible being in the family of content instead of pioneer.
Can I take a stab at that?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought about that at first, but one of the things I think they're saying is the opposite of it is determined. And so what it is I'm going to reach my goals, dang it. Your goals. I think being flexible is when you don't work for yourself and your boss says, this is what we're doing now, and you go, okay. You aren't the one making the change. The company is making the change. You're just expected to go along with it. Whereas determined on the pioneer side is these are my goals, my passion, my job. I'm going to do it. And then you make your own. You have to change with it, but you're changing because of yourself. Your goals are changing because you are changing them. Whereas the flexible, it's your boss that's changing them. And you're just going, okay, this is what we're doing now. Or do you fight against it or quit?
Right, because you're so determined on that. So
With that example, I'm equal because I wouldn't find myself heavier on the flexible. So that's what's interesting to me because I'm my own boss. I have to determine everything, and I've been.
mhm.
So there's Monique, I think it's a very good question. You've got two profile factors there at work. You've also got your creativity, where you like new and different things, and thinking of new and different ideas. But the other side, how much do you want to change the overall working environment that you have? In other words, you
So
like
this
being a
is
coach.
about the working environment?
Working
Or- 'cause I'm trying
environment.
to-
So it's,
what question should I
so
ask
people
myself
so
when I
people who are
answer that?
more content usually like to stay in a similar sort of job, live in the same community. They don't want to change their overall world too much, but that doesn't mean they can't be creative and explore new ideas. But the pioneer person might, completely venture out into a range of new fields on a regular basis and do things that are more off the map. Does that make
Hence, I
sense?
feel I'm not. And that would be the one thing that I would sort of challenge this on then, but because given that description, my life has been a little more pioneering than content. Given that description, that's just why I'm now. It confuses me a little more, even with your clarity.
Right. No, that's okay.
So perhaps I need to take it again. I don't know.
Yeah, and I
Maybe
guess
I've had a
the-
life issue.
on the flexibility, I would sort of say that, if you're going, I'm going to get 50 clients this year, I'm very determined because that's my goal. That if you sort of all of a sudden 2 months into the plan, like, you know what, I can shift it down to 10. I'm not going to beat myself up.
Or change my formula. When
Yeah.
you do
Yeah,
that.
that
Okay.
flexibility, that I'm okay with that. I only have to answer to myself. But if you were so determined, you would have a hard time saying, I didn't make
I'd
50.
be inflexible on that,
Yeah.
making that.
How much is a balanced
Okay,
life
that's
important to
interesting.
you in building your business?
Is that you're asking me now?
Yes.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right,
key.
so that's part of someone who's content. They want the status quo. They don't want to upset having the balanced life. Whereas the pioneer people will potentially upset that. They will sacrifice a lot of things to achieve their goals.
And even family relationships, because they're so driven.
What's on that balance scale depends on.
Yeah.
It may not be everybody's balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But remember as well, one of the other things that we've said today is that passion is very important. So when you've got a passion for something, you might push through that and be more determined on those areas that you're passionate about. But other things, the quality of life side of it will take over.
Got it.
So that's important.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about passion, actually. because that word in itself scares me a little bit, because passions change regularly. So I don't even know what I would do with someone that wanted very badly to start their own business, and I'm looking at their sheet going, "You sure?" Because they're like, "Well, I have a passion for this." I was like, "But will you next year?" So it's somewhere between asking people, okay, how important is this to you? Are you willing to give up family relationships for this? And what happens if you give up these relationships and then a year later crash and burn? So how do you work that into talking with someone?
So I think that there are passions and there are passions. And when I'm talking about passion, it's something that's a very deep burning desire. It's part of your purpose. It's what you throw your legs out of bed for every day. And in some way, you've probably been talking about the idea or the concept a long time. You're interested in it, you're reading about it, you're meeting people. It's something that really is driving you rather than it's just a fad at the current moment because it seems like a good idea and you get excited by it. So there's a little bit with passion sorting out what's new and shiny and what's very deep and real.
Yeah.
And that's a coaching question in itself. When it's deep and real, then, and it's about your purpose, then that's when you're going to overcome, you might adapt some of your behaviours in here solely to get it done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so some of the questions you can ask then are, when did this passion start for you? How long have you had this passion? What was your biggest passion 2 years ago? See if it starts to change. If they say no consistently, I've always cared about this. This has always been interesting to me.
Passion.
Then that's a passion that's driving purpose. If it's
Yeah.
I'm super passionate about tennis shoes. Well, what were you super passionate about 2 years ago? Well, 2 years ago it was hiking gear. Okay, well then that's not maybe not. I always try. Maybe that's not the thing you're gonna die for. Right?
Passions can change though. You're right. So passion is one of those, if you want to call it personality type factors and the overall, that could change in your life, right? It could be, you have a passion in your 20s, 30s and 40s and you have something different later on in life. Right? That is true, but normally a very deep passion is there for a long time. I even looked at before I started this business. Even though I was a chartered accountant or a CPA, I was on the block for teaching people tax. I was always brought into the education environment in the firm from very early on in my career. So I realised, I actually enjoy that. I actually enjoy teaching people. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So it
it does.
can prevail a long time before you start doing it.
I think it's important for self-feedback, getting feedback, asking people. You can really grow if you do that. Any questions on that? The workplace or the behavioral attitudes, which is included in that, either the summary report or the workplace operations, and we focus in on the two factors. Again, for Chris Coddington, pioneering skeptical, and you see here there's some great information. I tend to key in on these two things called blind spots and communication, sort of at the bottom here. But all these are important. But these are, sometimes he may have a blind spot that you wouldn't know, and everybody will be unique based on that behavioral factor. Can be too focused means, he's going for that goal, but it may not be something, he's so focused on it, maybe there are other things he needs to think about. Or the fearful, just sort of helping him be that coach to help him sort of alleviate those fears, get him into that more rational part of the brain of thinking. And communication, definitely provide big picture and be logical. Don't be emotional, sort of, when you're working with them. Any questions? And then the workplace insights. This is quite a great report to use, especially when you're starting to work with someone. And you focus on the scores that are high, 70% over, or the lows, because the medium ones would indicate that they're sort of in the medium on the intensity of those. But when you see someone that has this desire to make decisions at high, they're going to be very comfortable to make decisions. When you see it's really low, like 14%, and they're in a leadership role, that can be a big struggle for them. And I've seen that many times where people are sort of in leadership roles, but they're sort of more that relational, that cohesiveness. They probably struggle. So you can really gain a lot of information just from this Workplace Insights report. Any particular insight that you'd like to probe on? I'd say the most common question I get asked, and it usually comes from the very results-focused people, building long-term relationships usually scores low because it's about results. And we talked a little bit about the difference between going to a networking event with you and Monique. You know, she's going to meet a lot of people. Keith is going to be probably pretty selective about who he meets. This is, you know, or you wouldn't even go. No, exactly. But it really does point to that. It's got to be a little bit more what is, you know, more of an intentional relationship before you don't want it to be just chatter.